Black Doctors podcast highlights the stories of minority professionals with the goal of inspiring others. If you like what you hear, please subscribe and share with others, because the next generation can't be what they don't see. Tune in every Monday to hear our stories told by us.
Hello and welcome back to the Black Doctors podcast. Today I'm speaking with Dr. Bernard Ashby. He is a vascular cardiologist. He is the owner and medical director of Comprehensive Vascular Care. It's a practice down in South Florida. Bernard, welcome to the show.
Hey, it's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
Of course. So tell us, man, what is a vascular cardiologist?
So that's a great question, and a question I get quite often. And so vascular cardiology is a relatively new field. And basically what it means is that I'm board certified in cardiovascular disease as well as vascular medicine. So I did a 3-year fellowship in cardiology, and after that I did a 1-year fellowship in vascular medicine. And what vascular medicine is a non-invasive field that basically deals with blood vessels. So I basically tell people I'm a glorified plumber. And so I deal with I deal with the veins, the arteries, and the lymphatics, in addition to the heart.
Glorified plumber, ain't that Earl Campbell's field?
Yeah, I know that sounds about right, but I don't have a scope.
So what's a typical day or a typical week like for you at your practice?
Well, my day-to-day actually varies depending on a number of factors, but the main factor that affects my schedule is whether or not I'm on call. And basically, I take call maybe twice a month. When I'm on call, I essentially cover the hospital, and it's a large hospital that I cover. And I cover all of the cardiology cases that come into the ER. Mm-hmm. And because of that, I get quite busy during my call weeks, during my call days, because those patients, while they're in the hospital, I cover them. And so I'm in the hospital probably in the morning time, and then in the afternoons I'm in clinic. But in my non-call weeks, I essentially just do outpatient medicine, and I see patients. And because I started a new practice, I do a lot of administrative things. So it's a lot of business stuff going on, and it's a lot of admin, which I really dislike, but it's necessary. And, as a new physician entrepreneur, it's important to me to create a good, strong foundation for my practice so it will grow.
So how many patients are you seeing a day in your clinic?
Usually about 10 patients a day. It's not that much currently. And I'm new, but I try to space my patients out so I'm not overwhelming my staff or myself. But as I, progress, the patient load is increasing. So I'm actually in the process of hiring a nurse practitioner, and will soon be increasing my patient load.
And then part of a lot of what you do is procedures, right? Echocardiograms and whatnot. When and where are you performing those procedures?
So the echoes are done by my sonographers, but in the hospital, I do transesophageal echocardiograms. I do, temporary pacemakers, a few other things. And so that primarily occurs when I'm on call. But I'm primarily a non-invasive guy, meaning that I don't do many procedures. My primary focus is on medical management of cardiovascular and vascular disease.
How long has your practice been open?
I opened my doors in October 2018.
It takes a lot to just step out and hang a shingle and open your own practice. What led you to make that decision?
Yeah, for a number of reasons, but, most physicians are basically trained to become employees. What happens is when we get out of fellowship, first thing that we do, or actually while we're in fellowship, the first thing that we do is look for jobs. And most of us end up at a hospital or university or a private practice where we work a lot of hours. And at some point, if you do well, the practices promise you partnership. And, the sneaky secret is that you don't really become a partner. You go from a salaried employee to a profit sharing model, mm-hmm. where basically based on the amount of revenue that you generate, we collect a portion of that, and then the other part of that goes to overhead and the profit of the group. And so as an employee, actually, let me backtrack a little bit. I started my first job at Mount Sinai Medical Center, where I was an attending cardiologist, and I also had an appointment at Columbia University where I was a professor there. And it was cool, but at the end of the day, I saw quite a few issues, not the least of which was related to the fact that my boss was an MBA. Basically, his main incentive was profit. And so essentially a lot of the work that I did was to maintain the profit margins of the hospital, and not necessarily, it wasn't necessarily dedicated towards patient care. And so I decided that the best option for me was to be independent and to create a practice that was focused on quality patient care and not necessarily profits. And so that's when I decided to go out and become an independent practitioner. And so I basically opened a practice in Miami, and it did quite well. And I rapidly expanded and opened up a second location about 2 hours north of Miami in the Treasure Coast of Florida. And now I have two different offices, both of which are very productive in terms of our patient load. And now that I'm getting a bit overwhelmed, I'm hiring mid-levels for both offices so that I can expand my reach and just focus on the patients that are very needy.
So why don't you take us back to the beginning when you decided to become a physician?
Yeah, so, I was born and raised in South Florida. I was born at Jackson Memorial Hospital in Miami. But my parents are from the Caribbean, and my dad from Aruba, and my mom is from St. Kitts. And as any West Indian kid can tell you, the highest achievement is to become a doctor. I mean, you can be the CEO of Google, and that pales in comparison to being a doctor. So my mom pretty much brainwashed me. She is a respiratory therapist, and I thought that I always wanted to be a doctor because that's what I wanted to do. But in hindsight, she probably brainwashed me. But it wasn't until high school that I actually found my bearings and learned more about the field and more about the inequities that exist in healthcare, and realized the potential impact that I could have. And so that's why when I developed my true passion for medicine and went full throttle and decided to become a doctor on my own merit and, got focused. Before that, I was always a smart student, but not very much, not really engaged. And I actually got kicked out of my high school, and that was sort of a rude awakening for me. And that's when I decided.
What did you get kicked out for?
Well, I was actually in a magnet program. So I wasn't ever a bad kid. I was just kind of, aloof and just was focused on girls and just, having fun, and didn't do any work. And because of that, I got kicked out of the magnet program. And because the high school that I was at was not in my zone, I had to, get the package. And so, they jazzy me out of the school.
Yeah, you was just being you.
I ended up going to my home school. So what?
You was just being you.
Yeah, exactly. I was just chilling, and got caught up. Had my homies, and was more focused on being cool and getting girls. And eventually, I grew up, matured a little bit, and I got focused. So it wasn't until my last year of high school that I actually did well in terms of grades. And luckily, I scored very well on the SAT, and that's what allowed me to actually get into college.
And you went to Florida State for undergrad, right?
That is correct.
Yes, I know you crossed paths with one of my other friends, Dr. Simpson. She's a neurosurgeon. She was on the show earlier.
Yeah.
How do you remember her back in at FSU?
Man, me and Simpson, we were doing our thing. We were some regular students. No one would have ever guessed that we would be a cardiologist and a neurosurgeon. She was just a chill person, used to party and do her thing, and so did I. But low key, we would do our work, but no one identified us as the smart kids. I mean, other students were the chosen ones, and so when we both went to med school, people were pretty surprised.
That's so often the case for a lot of folks that look like us.
Yeah.
And I know she mentioned at Florida State there was some programs that you guys did that kind of helped set you up for medical school. Could you talk about that?
Oh man, yeah, that program saved me, man. I mean, essentially, it was a outreach program that was sponsored by the Florida State University Medical School, which just opened when I got there for undergrad. And basically, it provided tutoring and a lot of support services that I used. I mean, when I got to college, I was completely unprepared. I was overwhelmed. I didn't do very well, and I took advantage of the tutoring programs to catch up. And my story is one of, it's one of those stories that you wouldn't expect. I was highly unlikely to be where I'm at, and again, it was because of that support program that it gave me the tools to basically climb out of a ditch that I was in and catch up. And so I spent most of my first year of college just catching up and learning some fundamentals. And once I did that, I pretty much took off.
So you went from South Florida to North Florida, and then eventually to Cornell for medical school.
That is correct.
How did you get to Cornell? Like, what was that applications process like for you coming out of Florida State?
Well, the way I ended up at Cornell was sort of serendipitous. Cornell was not on my radar, but through that program, I went to what should we call it, this conference that was at University of Florida, and I met a woman that was representing Cornell, and she told me all about it, told me it was Ivy League and all this stuff, and I just went ahead and applied and didn't think I would get in, and by the grace of God, I got into Cornell. But in terms of the application process, it was the traditional application process for med school. After you get your GPA and your MCAT scores, you have to get your recommendation letters and put together a personal statement and just apply. And another thing that helped me was that I had an inside person in the I don't know what department that is, but the department that's responsible for receiving your recommendation letters and whatnot. One of the secretaries actually told me that one of the recommendation letters that I got was super weak. It was from my biochemistry teacher, a white dude, but I got the highest grade in his class as well, and assumed that a biochemistry review letter would be good. I mean, a biochemistry recommendation letter would be strong. And he wrote me some DS letter, and luckily I found that out before I submitted it and was able to get a letter from someone else that was much stronger. So it's just one of those examples of me being supported and protected by the village, man, because a lot of people who you wouldn't necessarily consider individuals that would aid in your candidacy helped me out, man. There was a lot of secretaries and just random people that just looked out for me. So I benefited from that for sure.
How was that transition moving to Cornell, Ivy League? How was the diversity and what was your experience there?
Man, it was a rough transition. I mean, when I got there, I was, I had my earrings in and dressed the way I did and talked the way I did. And because of that, I was a target. I used to get, low marks on subjective grades. When I would get like these reviews from my professors, they would, say things like, Ashby needs to work on his grammar and like that. But I actually did quite well at Cornell because at that point I was a very strong student, and I used to, murder the tests and murder the standardized exams. But I used to still have to contend with, my subjective grades, which would always pull down my average. So I spent a lot of time contesting grades that I got, because, some, would give me a low mark for oral exam. But then I would, get in the top 10th or first or whatever percentile on the standardized exams. And so I would have to, advocate for my grades to be increased, because I would, pretty much be in line for honors, but I would get pulled down to a high pass, sometimes even just a pass, because the subjective grades would pull me down. And that's a common theme for a lot of Black folks. And unfortunately, a lot of Black folks don't test that well. You know what I mean? And because of that, they quote unquote are struggling students.
Yeah.
And luckily, I tested well, and that's what allowed me to do well at Cornell, despite the fact that I would get low marks on a lot of the subjective parts of my grade, because I didn't go to private school, I didn't speak the Queen's English, and because of that, I would get marked down, unfortunately. But yeah, I did well, and overall, my experience at Cornell was a positive one. I did have a lot of support there as well, and luckily I matched well for residency.
Yeah, I want to focus in on this and ask this question because it's a difficult question and one that comes up often. And I know a lot of medical students, residents of color struggle with this. The choice between fitting in and being yourself and standing out, the code switch question. So how did you, we clearly know which way you went. Did you think about, I'm sure people were like, hey, Bernard, just do this, do that, fit in. How did you approach that?
Well, yeah, I used to code switch like a I learned quick that, if I was myself, people would just assume that I was dumb. And so I used to try and speak all proper and shit and speak the Queen's English and probably sounded dumb to them anyways. And, just try to survive because, in residency, in internship in particular, it was tough as hell. I struggled because, internship is more about organization and just efficiency more so than knowledge. And because I wasn't the most organized and I had difficulty in just getting my notes done before rounds, I used to struggle. And my residents, I just didn't have a connection with them. And oftentimes I would get a call from the chief or a program director about, something that my resident was unhappy with, but my residents never spoke to me about it. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. They never would come and say, hey, you're not doing your notes or this is not happening. How can I help you? It would never be that. It would just be, I would go to the principal's office, so to speak. And, basically I had to grind it out. And, by the time I was a second year, I was killing it, but I had to get it out the mud, so to speak, and do it, build myself up.
I think that correlates well to where you're at today. I'm gonna run this quote by you. Did you or did you not say Donald Trump needs to Jazzy Jeff his up out the White House on national television?
Yeah, I definitely said that. My mom wasn't pleased, but I said what I said.
So during this COVID pandemic, you have been front and center, hold it down for our people down there in South Florida. You're on the Breakfast Club, MSNBC, CNN, always wearing your custom comprehensive vascular care tracksuit. What was it? Leslie Jones even made a post about you.
Yeah, she did. And that's when I know I made it.
Exactly. And this whole time you've been spitting truth. You've been spitting facts. It's been unfiltered. You're talking about COVID-19 and how communities need healthcare that they're not receiving.
Yeah.
How did you come to grow to that platform?
Another great question. So I ended up getting connected with a group called Committee to Protect Medicare. And essentially, their entire mandate is to increase access to healthcare, and get people insured, but more specifically, get them access to quality physicians and hospital systems. And so they reached out to me and saw what I was doing on social media, and basically started booking me for media engagement. But it wasn't really until I did Joy Reid that I took off. She loved me. And once she loved me, everybody else loved me. Mm-hmm. And they would just reach out, and they still reach out, and they want me to they asked me to speak on various topics, but it's mainly COVID-19 related.
And despite the rough edges and the unfiltered takes.
Yeah. And what I attribute it to is the fact that I'm able to be myself, because I left the slave and I left the institution, I was able to be myself and be dynamic and not filtered and not worry about what Big Brother would think of what I have to say. Now it's what I have to say, and it's like what they think, what anybody thinks. You know what I mean? I'm my own boss, and I'm going to do it my way. And that's essentially what allowed me to be different than every other robotic doctor that they bring on those shows. They come on and they talk in relatively monotone, in a monotone way. And, they sound like, academics. But what I'm basically doing is sort of revolutionary in that I'm being myself. I speak like a regular dude that, anybody, like I speak like a regular dude, like we all speak the same way. But as Black folks in America dealing with a predominantly white country, we feel like we have to sound a certain way so that we come off as intelligent. But I already been co-signed by the white folks. You know what I mean? I've already, I got my Ivy League degrees, and I was chief fellow at one point, and I've excelled at every level, and so they can't say shit to me, and I could just be myself without having to deal with what so many of us have to deal with, which is that concept of what's the word I'm looking for? The imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
So ain't none of that with me because I know I'm supposed to be there. I don't feel like no imposter. And, the society tells us that we're less than, and it's really a remnant of slavery, but also, currently what society tells us. I mean, if it ain't white, it ain't right. But I'm Black and I'm proud, and I know that not only do I deserve to be there, but I need to be there. And we need to have more folks like me and you and others who are not just functioning at a high level, but shifting these institutions and creating our own institutions to actually address the issues that exist in our communities, especially as it pertains to healthcare.
Your reputation and your pedigree, as they say, speaks for itself. So because you went to med school at Columbia, was it internal medicine residency at George Washington University?
Yeah, no, I went to med school at Cornell. Did my residency at Columbia, and then I did policy/cardiology at George Washington, and then I went to Hopkins and did my vascular training.
And then you went to Princeton for health policy.
Yeah. Between Columbia and George Washington, I did a master's in policy at Princeton.
Yeah, no, we appreciate you. We appreciate all that you're doing and being out there on the front lines. And I'm sure your patients and folks enjoy. I mean, the number of times folks from the RMRN group, we've seen you on the news, in the hospital, or other people see you on the news, man. You're really affecting change.
I appreciate that, man. And I do it for my people. I do it for my community, and I do it for the right reasons. This is really my passion, my calling, and I'm all about kicking down doors and opening, creating opportunities for other folks. And mentorship is extremely important. And I always say that I practice the village mentality because the village raised me. I wouldn't be here if a lot of people didn't look out for me in big and small ways. And I don't act like I am a self-made man. I am a product of my community. So it's definitely a mandate of mine to give back as much as possible to prove everybody right.
Yeah,
and validate their investment in me.
And speaking of mentorship, I know you were involved in a lot of different avenues to provide that mentorship and guidance in the community. What's one of the ones you're most excited about and you enjoyed the most?
I mean, yeah, I do a lot of different programs, but really, what I'm most proud of is by my one-on-one mentorship with my mentees. So, I just love the fact that I'm able to help people and guide them through an incredibly difficult process. And so, having that one-on-one time where I can sit down and speak to my mentees and, enlighten them about the process of becoming a doctor, I find it very rewarding. And I'm happy to tout my record that every single one of my mentees are either in medical school or training or are physicians. And it's really a testament to the fact that I help them not recreate the wheel. Also often, students of color get their advice from, cookie cutter people such as their advisor, the college advisor, who never went to vet school, never sat on the admissions committee, and don't know what they talk about half the time. And you're competing against people who are children of doctors,
right?
Who really have all the information and resources at their disposal. And what I try to do is try to level the playing field. I mean, you're never going to level the playing field, but at least as a mentor, I could make the path to becoming a physician a lot less arduous.
Yeah. And I know you've talked before about mentorship, and I think you had a bit of a different style. I know you mentioned kind of rolling up in some of the nice cars and nice clothes and just kind of relating with the kids that, they're looking up to, the hip hop stars and rappers, and then you were there to kind of provide a different route.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really floss like that, but one of the things that I did do when I became a cardiologist was get a nice whip, and it was a gift to myself, and it was one of those things that I grew up wanting to do. When I was a kid, I was like, I want a Lamborghini. I didn't quite get a Lambo, but I got a Mazda. And I love it, but what I found is that the kids in the hood, when I would pull up, that they, like, once they saw the whip, that they would listen to me. That like all of a sudden they were like, yo, like, this dude got a Mazda. I want a Mazda. I wonder how he got it, and it would immediately grab their attention. And so I don't do it to floss at all, but what I do find is that a lot of the kids in the community, because society incentivizes us to want nice things, you have to meet them where they're at. And once I'm engaged and I have their attention, I let them know that the Mazda ain't. What I mean? It's just a material thing. I mean, what's really valuable is the impact that you have on your family and your community, and what you can do to change everybody else's circumstances. So once I have their ear, then I can do a lot more damage in terms of dismantling a lot of the mental slavery that we see in our communities.
That's dope, man. Use it as a means to an end.
Yeah, for sure. And me getting that Mazda was kind of a form of mental slavery. I mean, I wanted that nice car because I wanted to stunt, but once I got it, I mean, it didn't mean as much to me, and I've evolved as a person, and I understand and appreciate the things that have real value, because as you get older, and if you're someone like me who's always learning, and not just medicine, I love learning history, and I love learning culture, and I love learning psychology, and because of that, I've evolved, and my thinking is, as a new cardiologist, is much different than today as a grown man with a son, and I just view the world differently. And so because of that, I approach everything differently. And one of the things that I try to do is try to disseminate the information that I learned, but also encourage my mentees and really anyone that I come in contact with to be an avid learner, and try to think outside of the box, and not just depend on the education that was given to you, because that our education is very biased, and we've been fundamentally miseducated in a lot of ways. So we've been fundamentally miseducated in a lot of ways, and so it's important that folks not only learn but seek primary sources, and so that they're able to gain that information and synthesize it and be independent thinkers, because so much of what we learn has been filtered through the lenses of other folks, many of which come from backgrounds that are not anything like ours. And one of the things that I'm proud of is learning more about history, all history, but more specifically Black history, African history, and that has empowered me as an individual.
Well, I'm trying to evolve too, man. So let me borrow that Mozzie.
Yeah, I got you, man. You can push it anytime you come to Miami, man. Pull up on me. I got you.
All right. Well, we got a little ways to go on the vaccine before I get down that way.
For sure.
Dr. Ashby, thank you so much. Thank you so much for coming on the show. You have your practice down there in South Florida. Talk to the people. We got some listeners down there that may be looking for a cardiologist. It is heart disease is what the number one leading cause of death in Black or African Americans. Is that?
Yeah, it is. It's the number one cause of death in the U.S. and the developed world. Just like every other disease or every other bad thing that happens, Black folks die at a higher clip than everyone else, and it's an incredibly impactful field. So, if you are concerned about your health, if you just want to get screened, I'm very much a proponent of preventative medicine. Pull up on me. And if you have a cardiovascular condition, pull up on me. But I tend to focus on lifestyle modification and health rather than just treatment. If you ever come to see me, you'll get more than just some pills. You'll get, hopefully you won't get any pills, but you'll get a prescription for improving your health overall and not just treatment. So if you ever need a cardiologist, pull up on me. Called Comprehensive Vascular Care. We have offices in Miami and another one in Port St. Lucie in the Treasure Coast. Just look me up. I'll give you the phone number, but just look me up or visit our website at cvcmedicine.com.
And definitely follow Dr. Ashby on social media. It's b.ashby, ASHBYMD on Instagram. He's also on Twitter. He's always putting out good information. In addition to cardiology, you also offer some COVID-related services?
Yeah. Basically, I just do testing, primarily antigen and molecular testing, but I also do antibody testing as well. So that's kind of the side hustle of my practice. It's time to get tested. We also do flu and strep throat testing as well. But at the end of the day, I'm a cardiologist, and that's my primary focus.
Well, Dr. Ashby, thank you so much for joining us. I know I definitely enjoyed our conversation, and our listeners will learn a lot and take away a lot of good things from what you said.
I appreciate you. Thanks for having me.
The Black Doctors Podcast is a nonprofit, volunteer passion project with the goal of inspiring all who listen. Tune in next week for another episode of the Black Doctors Podcast with Dr. Stephen Bradley, your friendly neighborhood